Hi everyone. So we're just going to have a look at how to prep up the basic plane shape here that I've got as a start file. So first things first, let's have a look at what we're actually up to. So the plan is that there was this really nice image on Blender Artists, which is a great Blender forum, and it's got some really nice renders of this kind of cool seaplane, and we're going to give it a go. So to get somewhere close to this, it's got quite a few interesting parts in the render. We can see that it's got some nice textures down below on the ocean. We've got some particles there with the sea spray. We've got some motion effects with the propellers up here, and we've got a HDRI environment that's doing a lot of the lighting for us as well. So it's a really it's a nice looking image. And so to start out, first thing I've got is if you go to the computer graphics classroom, I've got a few resources here for you. If you're watching this on YouTube, then I've got some resources down below that you can get as well. Okay, I've got two things: the shipyard, and I've got the seaplane start file. I've got the Porco Rosso trailer there if you want to check out a bit of weird plane design. And I've also got the links to those images on Blender Artists of that, of that really nice plane render. So let's get into it. So I've downloaded Blender from blender.org, and I'll just pop into the interface. So I'm just opening up the basic plane file at the moment. So this is what you should see when you open it up. And if this is your first time in Blender, it's probably worth getting yourself a mouse, and it'll make life a lot easier. Okay. First thing, if it is your first time in Blender, I would recommend that getting into this file and changing this little tab to User Preferences, coming over to Input in your User Preferences, and checking left mouse instead of right mouse. And if you're working on a laptop like I am, it's worth turning on Emulate Numpad as well. Once you got those, just go Save User Settings, and we can go back to our 3D view. So these windows, we can repurpose them for whatever we want to. Okay, so now that we can select things by left clicking, I think it'll feel a lot more natural. Blender uses right as default, and it's not particularly user friendly. So if I start selecting pieces, you'll see that the settings up here, it'll start to select sections. So this is the outliner, which tells us what all the components are in our scene. And we can see here in the scene, I've got this basic body shell. I've got the stump of a couple of wings. So I'm going to hold down my mouse button to have a bit of a look around the scene. I've got some basic tail planes coming out, and I've got some verticals there as well. So we've got a few parts ready to go. The first thing we can start to have a look at is, you'll notice if I click on the body, is that if I hit my tab key, or I change this from object to edit mode, tab key does the same thing. It allows us to go in and have a look at the mesh that creates the object. Now the mesh is made up of vertices. So you can see the vertices are the corners here where the edges are joined together. So when I'm in vertice mode, which is this little square down here with a picture of a vertice on it, I can select single or multiple vertices, and I can grab this arrow here, and that'll move it on a single axis. And you'll notice that when I do move it, I've got this set up with a mirror modifier, so that what I do to one side, it does it to the other side as well. So that's going to make our life a lot easier building our plane. The next thing along, we've got an edges selector. And the edges selector, so these are edges. Edges are formed by two vertices, and it's the edge runs between them. So I can select those. Or the next one along is the face selector, and that allows me to select the whole face, and the face is made up of 3 or more vertices. So in this, we'll be trying to keep things to edges or faces, that have got 4 vertices, so that they're so that we can do some loop cutting later on them. Excuse me. Okay, so let's have a look at this. The first thing is we can see that we've got some basic wings there. They're quite smooth, but the body of our aircraft is quite chunky. Blender's got a really good system for smoothing things out called a subsurface system. And if I come across here to this modifier, which is this spanner, and click on it, then you're going to see that at the moment I've already got one modifier on here, and that's this mirror modifier. So that's what's causing, if I move something on one side, mirrors it to the other side. And you can see I've got the particular axis selected, and it's also it's merging and clipping, okay, where it crosses over in the middle. Makes it a bit tidier. Okay, so I'm going to add another modifier to this, and the modifier I'm going to add is a subdivision surface. Subdivision surface, as you can see, once I click on it once, it creates a shape within the mesh, but it's still a bit chunky, okay? So there's some controls down here for the subsurface. We can turn up how smooth it is in as far as the viewport goes, and we can also turn up how smooth it is in our final render. So I wouldn't go too far with this, for it'd be like starting to go maybe a bit too far. We want to keep it fairly low so that it doesn't tax our processor too much while we're working. When you need to check it out in a bit more detail, you can, push it up there, but I certainly wouldn't recommend going past 5, because each time you do it, it's going to double the amount of vertices it's dealing with, and it soon gets out of control. So we've got this smoothed up a little bit, which is cool. So, but let's start to work on that body shape a little bit more so that it's a little bit better. So at the back here, we can see that the tail's a bit short at the moment. So I'm going to select the two faces at the back. So I'm just going to click on those, hold down Shift, select both of them, and I'm going to just go E for extrude, and it's going to allow me to extrude back towards the tail. So I'm going to extrude once, and I'm going to extrude again, and just a tiny little bit, and that'll give us a sharper finish on the back of the tail. So you can see it's starting to come together at the moment, okay? So that's pretty good. The body is one piece, and we'll work on that more by moving and extruding to get it to look good. But if we want to work on the wings, they're a separate piece. So we're going to go out of edit mode and into object mode. Object mode lets us select these different parts. And here's the wings here. I've got them set up. You can see here with a mirror over here. I can go into edit mode to view the wing. And the wings are a little bit different in that we can see it's got solid faces around it, but it's also got an edge around the outside. So what I can do is I can select, once I've got edge selected, I can select one piece of the edge, and that's fine. But if I want to get a little bit more refined with my selection, I can go select down here, and I can select edge loop. And what edge loop's going to do is it's going to follow that edge around, and it's going to select the whole of the wing. So it's going to make life a little bit easier. So then I can do just like I did on the tail, an E for extrude, and I can start extruding back. Now, in 3D, it's a little bit hard to tell what direction you're going in. You can see here I'm squishing the wings in all sorts of weird ways. So you can specify a direction by hitting your Z key, which will make it vertical, which we don't want. You can hit your X key, which will move along the X axis, so you only got to hit it once. Or in this case, I'm going to hit my Y key, and that's going to allow me to extend my wings out. So I'm just going to start to move them out to make them a bit longer. Going to have a look at them. I might use my arrows just to adjust the height of them a little bit. And you can also scale them. So S for scale is a really easy way to go. So I'm going to shrink my wingtips in a little bit. And you can also scale in one direction with an axis. So I'm going to hit S, and I'm going to hit my X key, and it's going to let me shrink along the X axis a bit. And I might hit S and scale the Z axis so the wings are a bit thinner out near the tips as well. So that is going to give me a wing that's a little bit more refined. Okay, it's a pretty chunky aircraft, so we're going to be keeping everything not too smooth, but we're going to make it a bit of fun and keep it fairly chunky. But that's a pretty good way to go. Okay, so our wings starting to come together. I can sort of move them around a bit, look at it from different angles, and get a feel for how it's looking. Now, at the moment, we're viewing this in solid mode, so we can see that the parts of the plane are just this grey solid colour. We can see the wireframe of the mesh around it. We've got a few other modes down here we can view things in, depending on what we're doing. We've got this wireframe mode, which runs nice and fast, doesn't tax our processor, and allows us to kind of see in and through and see how things are constructed. Moving up from there, we've got our solid mode that we've been working in, and probably we haven't really added texture or material yet, but if we move right up to rendered mode and have a look, you'll see that I've got the craft set here with a background, a high dynamic range background of an ocean, and that is set to our world settings, and it's doing the lighting for us and adding a background as well. So that'll be coming useful later on when we're doing the render. But let's swap back to solid mode at the moment, and let's have a look at some other parts. So as far as the wing goes, we've done some good stuff, but we need to create, if we go back and have a look at the original image, you'll see that the wings have got these big slabs on the ends of them. Let's get some of those going. So we'll do it, we'll create them from scratch, and an easy way to go is just select any face. I'm going to select this one here, and I'm going to go Shift D to duplicate that face. Okay, so I've got it duplicated, but I'm also going to separate it. So I'm going to hit P and go Separate Selection. Okay, so what happens now when I go out is I've got a separate piece here that I can select, and I won't move it actually. I'll leave it where it is, but I now can go into Edit, and I can select that piece, and I can start to move it out to the edges of my plane. You can see it as I move it to the left, it moves the other side to the right, and I can start to rotate it as well. So I can hit R for rotate, just like we were doing scale. So I can go R for rotate, set an axis, and I can rotate it up, which is one way of doing it. Or I can open up this tool here, and I could rotate it within this, but I don't think I will actually. I think I'll just rotate it X axis and set this up. If you want to do it in 5-degree increments to make life a little bit easier, so I want it to be exactly 90, I can hold down Control and it'll do the job for me. Okay, so I can move it out to the ends of the wings, and it starts to give me a shape. So what I'm going to do is, now that I've got that, I'm going to go E for extrude, and I'm going to give it a little bit of thickness. But you'll notice at the moment, it's kind of like not the ideal shape. It's a kind of like just a flattened spherical type object. I'm going to start to add some control points in this using loop cuts so that we can get a bit more controllable shape. So doing loop cuts is pretty easy. I like to just use Control R, okay, and that loop cut will then appear as a pink line. I can click once, and it's going to allow me to select where I sit it. So I just slide it along. So I'm going to sit one up the top there. I'm going to go Control R and set up a second one and slide that down to the bottom. And you can see now that the subsurface bends around these. So it gives us that nice control. I'm going to do Control R, and I'll do a vertical one. Just move your mouse around till you get the right feel, and I'll move it forward so they're looking pretty good. Okay, so that is starting to give us the look that we're after. They're a little bit kind of like slab-sided at the back at the moment, so we might curve it like those tail planes. So if we're going to do that, I'm just going to zoom in, and I'm going to have a look. Now I can do this different ways, but in this case, I'm going to get right in, have a look. You can see I'm going to select this edge, and I'm just going to start to move it down by grabbing the blue arrow. And you can see it's starting to add some curvature into that back tail plane. So I'll keep that fairly curved, but I think I might keep the bottom fairly sharp. And this front edge, I might do the same. Just give it a little bit of curvature, just to make it look a little bit better. Okay. All right. So the subsurface always just bends around those points. If you want to give it more shape as you go along, we can Control R and add in like a midpoint, slide it along, and that will allow you to just say grab an edge here, and you can just start to pull it out a bit, and you can start to give this a little bit more volume if you want to. Okay, you don't need to make these too complicated, but they'll start to give you the look that we're after. And if we have a look at this now, we'll pop it into rendered mode because it's a bit of fun. You start to see that the shape is starting to come together. All right, now I've got some rear tail planes made up for you already. Let's have a look. So I'm just going to go into solid mode here. And I'm just going to have a look at my top view by hitting 7. I'm going to turn off perspective by hitting 5. Okay, I'm just going to make sure that's set in the middle. And the same thing as before, I'm going to go into edit mode here. Use your tab if you want to. And let's have a look at another selection method, which is super handy. I'm going to go into wireframe. So we can go into wireframe down here. Okay, or you can hit your Z key, either or. But once we're into wireframe mode, we can see through objects, and we can also select through objects as well. So if I go into vertice mode, I can use my B key, hit it once, lets me draw out a box, and you can see it's selected all those vertices there. So I can go E for extrude, and I can extrude the back, and it allows me to create my tail plane like that. Okay. So if I look around now, holding my middle mouse button and rotating, middle mouse button and shift lets me slide my view. I can see it's starting to come up all right. If I want to see it in a bit more detail, I can move to solid mode and I can see how it's looking. Okay, that's pretty good. I might just need to tweak these fins just a touch. Okay, get them sitting. I might just S for scale and scale them up. It's a bit of a cheat, but it'll do the job. Okay, so we're starting to get the form of the plane working. Okay, so that's kind of like stage 1. You can see that on these rear tail planes, I've just added a little bit of detail here. It's nothing like too crazy, but all these details help add shadows to the way that your plane works. So they're worth getting into. I'm going to go into edit mode and let's have a look here. So I'm going to Control R and I'm going to add in a bit of a loop cut, and I might add it up onto this one like this. Okay, that's cool. So I've got a loop cut, I've got a little bit of sort of like a geometry there. I'm going to select that section and I'm going to do E for extrude. And I'm going to bring it out only just a fraction. E for extrude again, do a second extrude, and what that'll do is give a sharp break where I did the first extrude and then a smooth break on the second. Just try that out and experiment with how it works. But each one of these is going to give you a little bit of a hint at where some mechanical sort of like detail might be in your model. So you can do multiples of those, experiment around with them. So I'm going to do Control R. When you're doing a loop cut, Control R, if you start to scroll your mouse wheel, you'll see you can do a lot of extra cuts there if you wanted to get some more. So I'm just rolling my mouse wheel, it's giving me heaps of loop cuts. I could just pop that in there now if I wanted to. Whoops, I don't really want to slide it, I just want to leave it where it is. And then I can start to select, so I might select every second one of these. Okay, that's good. And I might select all these as well, just the next face along. That's good. So I'm just holding down Shift, selecting each one, taking my time. And then when I've got it, I'm just going to go E for extrude and just hardly move it. And then E for extrude a second time and bring it out. And you can see now it's going to give me a set of ripples down that surface, which will start to add some like shadow line details on the surface of our object. So that is starting to get there, okay? So by extruding just a small amount, it forces the subsurf to like break around it at a sharp angle. And that's something that you want to experiment with a bit if you're using subsurf. You can see that the cockpit of the plane at the moment is looking quite rounded and bulbous, but once we start adding some loop cuts through this as well, we'll be able to set some harder lines and make it look a little bit better. So I can go Control R and I can start to set a line on the body, and I can start to set these a little bit sharper in different sections of the body, so it's got a little bit more definition. Otherwise, everything that you build in subsurface can look like a bit of a lolly that's been sucked on for too long. It'll look too rounded in the surface. Okay, so that's the basics of part one. So we've started to get our plane together. We haven't got motors on it yet, but it's looking okay. All right, so that's video number one. We'll keep chugging through these as we go along, but I think that's just enough to get you started and modelling in this challenge. Okay, so thanks everyone, and I'll see you in video two.